So when I think about wonders of the Wade, there are so many things. But as a George MacDonald scholar, I particularly gravitate towards this volume of the Arabian Nights that was edited by Andrew Lang in 1898. But it belonged to the MacDonald family. You see on the inside, there's an inscription to Lilia Mary MacDonald, which is one of George MacDonald's granddaughters, from her uncle Grenville, his MacDonald's son, Christmas 1905. And the Christmas part matters a great deal. And inside the book, there's a wonderful little treasure. It says, "A Happy Christmas, George MacDonald." And I think these two are together deliberately because this book is associated with Christmas in the MacDonald family. Because Christmas is a time for reading aloud, and especially for the Victorians, ghost stories. But along with ghost stories, kind of goblin stories, fairy stories, the weird, the wondrous of all kinds. And so a genie and all of the magical elements in the Arabian Nights made for a winter evening around the fire, fascinating read to the family aloud. And of course, the MacDonald family was a large family, so you have to picture quite a few people gathering to hear a story together. George MacDonald had 11 children. His wife said it was the wrong side of a dozen. She wanted even more. So they would read. And I think this volume in particular, I imagine, was not given to Lilia new, but had been read in the family, and she had particularly enjoyed it. And it was kind of a family heirloom passed on to her to say, you're part of this tradition of us reading aloud at Christmas time. And we want you to have this magical volume that meant so much to you when you were a child. George MacDonald himself was a pretty important figure in the rise of Christmas as the most wonderful time of the year. The MacDonald family loved Christmas before it was as heightened and fashionable as it became later on. They were early adopters of really focusing on Christmas. George MacDonald would write a poem for Christmas every single year. They would go out caroling. Again, before that was done, it was kind of a well-known neighborhood funny thing that this big family would go out caroling and everybody would wait for them and see them and be excited by it. So the love of childhood that George MacDonald had, the love of fantasy literature for children, all kind of converge together on Christmas as the right time to enjoy fantasy stories, including the Arabian Nights and George MacDonald's own fantasy stories as well. I've always been a Victorian scholar from my very beginning for my PhD, and I also worked a lot on Congregationalists. He was actually trained to be a Congregational minister, and so it just became inevitable that this really important literary figure who I understood the ecclesiastical history side of his life and the time period of his life, that I would be drawn to him. So like most other people, I read MacDonald books initially just as a fan, just enjoying for entertainment rather than for any kind of scholarship. I read princess stories and The Princess and the Goblin and other things. But it came around to a point where I realized here is a really important author that I have some context for understanding because I know the time period he lived in, I knew how he was trained, I knew the ministers that he knew in terms of reading their books and their theology, and so I thought I'll have a look and see if I can see something different. Many literary scholars have worked on George MacDonald, but I thought maybe if somebody who's a church historian came, I might bring something new to the conversation, and so I started to work more seriously on him in terms of research.